All right. Well, we will have a look at the agenda. Does anybody have any additions or changes?
Good morning, Madam Reeve. It's Brian from administration. I do have one addition to the agenda. It would be an in-camera item for the subject being Lakes of Muirfield, and the FOIP section would be 16, and it is a legal matter.
Excellent. We'll put that under 6, and we'll do it as number 2.
I'd like to add meeting ratifications.
We will add that under 2.2, unfinished business or business arising.
Yeah, it's Tom, and I'd like to add the discussion. I don't know where it goes, but I'd like to add the discussion about directing the county to county purchasing anywhere but China. So I'd like to add that discussion to this. So I don't know where that would go.
Under new business, we don't have that here.
We can just put it under items for discussion. We'll do 2.3.
Perfect. Thank you.
Any other changes to the agenda? A motion to adopt?
I'll move, Tom.
Councillor Eichert.
Good morning.
Good morning, Councillor Custer.
I phoned the number on the top of this string and it was the wrong one, evidently.
Well, I'm glad we got it working. Welcome and good morning.
Okay, good morning. What did I miss?
We're just still looking at the agenda. So we've had the addition under 2.2 to ratify attendance at meetings. Under 2.3, we've added a discussion regarding procurement. And we've added a second closed session matter regarding Lakes of Muirfield under FOIP section 16.
Okay. Was I the only one who phoned in on that number?
I believe everybody else is on except Deputy Reeve Clausen, and he indicated he might just be a few minutes late.
Okay. Okay. Thank you.
And Councillor Eichert has a motion on the floor to adopt the agenda. Is there any further discussion?
As amended?
As amended, yes. Thank you. Is any councillor opposed? Motion is carried. The minutes were circulated as part of our package for our regular council meeting, March 3rd, 2020.
I'll move to
that. Chairman Ben Armstrong.
Councillor Armstrong has moved. Any discussion? Is any councillor opposed? Hearing none, the motion is carried. We have the minutes from the public hearing from March 3rd, 2020 for bylaws 2019-35, 2020-10, 2020-07, and 2020-08.
Wilson moves to approve.
Councillor Wilson has moved. Is there any discussion? Is any councillor opposed? Motion is carried. On page 20 of our agenda package, we have the regular council meeting minutes from March 24th. A motion to approve?
Wilson
So
moves.
moved, Ben Armstrong.
Councillor Armstrong has moved. Any discussion? Is any councillor opposed? Motion is carried. We have the public hearing minutes from our March 24th for bylaws 2019-12, 2020-01, 2020-04, 2019-33, 2020-14, and 2019-40. On page 32 of the council package.
Wilson moves to
Council,
approve.
Beat me.
Sorry, it just garbled a little bit. I heard two people speak.
Tom moves.
Councilor Eichert moves to approve the minutes.
Thank you. Councillor Eichert has moved. Any discussion? Is any councillor opposed? Motion is carried. We'll move to page 39 in our council package, a request for decision regarding Speargrass Land Use Bylaw Amendment, Bylaw 2019-36.
Good morning, Council. This is Megan Williams. I wanted to make an addition to this report. I neglected to include the motion for a bylaw, for the public hearing rather. And so I would like to add the recommendation, in addition to the first reading of this bylaw, that we schedule the public hearing for bylaw 2019-36 be scheduled for May 19th, 2020 at 9 a.m. at Wheatland County Council Chambers. Just going to screen share. All right, so this bylaw is a proposal to amend the Speargrass land use designations to remove secondary suites as a discretionary use, to require development permits or for fences, and to restrict the length of time RVs are permitted to be stored on a property. So this request came out of a development permit application made in September of last year for a secondary suite. MPC refused the application, and then the Speargrass Community Association submitted a land use bylaw amendment application, not only to remove the dwelling secondary suite as a use within Speargrass Low Density Residential District and the Speargrass Medium Density Residential District, but they also proposed to limit the length of time RVs are permitted to be stored on personal property to 5 consecutive days, and they're also requesting a development permit be required for all new fences. As this amendment would directly impact all of the residents of Speargrass, staff held an open house on January 16th of this year in Carsland. About 40 people attended, and a summary of the meeting was attached to this RFD. You can see it on page 46 of the council package. The amendment process was explained to the folks who attended, as well as what the proposed amendments were. Staff was interested in learning if the community members were in favor of the proposed amendments. Those in attendance were interested. However, staff also received comments from those who were unable to attend who did not feel comfortable speaking up during the meeting, that they did not agree with the proposed amendments. So the staff has received several comments from ratepayers, and those will be included in the public hearing package. So staff is proposing 2 recommendations, the first one being that council grant first reading to this bylaw 2019-36, and that the public hearing be scheduled for May 19th. We did receive a couple of comments through circulation. That is on page 45. The Protective Services did have comments about the enforceability of the RV parking. They explained that enforcement would require an officer to provide a notice of entry to go onto the property in order to chalk mark or otherwise mark an RV in order to start the time of offense. And in order to enforce, the county would have to issue a stop order. And they would suggest that because this would be dealing with personal property, injunctions would have to be applied for in the Queen's Bench Court in order to allow removal of the property, or from the property rather. There can be fines levied every day until there's compliance, and that may solve the issue. And Protective Services had no comments regarding the fencing or secondary suites. And that concludes my presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Megan. Council's wishes.
Through the chair, Ben Armstrong here. Just a clarification question. To Megan, are dogs considered livestock in a rural environment?
Through the chair, no, they're not. They're a household pet.
Oh, okay, thank you.
If there's no further questions, I'd like to set a motion to approve bylaw 2019-36 and for the open house to be held May 19th, 2020, 9 a.m.
So we'll just do two motions. I think we typically do two. Is that right? Yeah, we do. Can you just amend your motion just to approve first reading?
I will approve first reading of bylaw 2019-36.
Thank you. Councillor Bigger has moved to approve first reading. Any discussion? Is any councillor opposed? Motion is approved. Or motion is carried, sorry. And a second motion?
Yeah, Ben Armstrong, I'll move public hearing for bylaw 2019-36 for May 19th, 2020.
Councillor Armstrong has moved. Any discussion? Any discussion on the motion?
I'd like to add a comment after this motion.
Okay, thank you. Is anyone opposed to the motion to schedule the public hearing for May 19th? Motion is carried. Councillor Bigger, you had a comment?
Yeah, I just wanted to let county staff know that there is an RV parked, and that will be parked till this COVID thing is over because of the COVID problem, and they're using it as an office just outside their home so they can work from home, just so that they know that.
Yeah, and I was wondering, and I'm not sure the most appropriate time to raise it, but I know some municipalities are providing exemptions to rules around limits of time for RV parking in kind of more urban nodes, because there's also the issue some healthcare workers are utilizing RVs as sort of a self-isolation alternative housing so that they can self-isolate from their family. So I'm not sure. I know it's a very unique caveat, but maybe might want to have some kind of caveat for an exception that could be applied for or something.
Good morning, Madam Chair. It's Brian from administration. So our peace officers are using their discretion at the moment. Certainly, we do recognize that there are unique circumstances throughout the county, and so we're really using our discretion for miscellaneous enforcement. So,
thank you.
And Madam Reeve, it's just Matt here. Just for council's information, we are looking at preparing a report to council. We did receive some ministerial orders that are providing some exceptions and some discretion to use when dealing with enforcement in terms of the land use bylaw. So we will be preparing a report and bringing that back to council for information on how we can proceed and utilizing best practices of our rural neighbors, incorporating that into what we do at the county for the time being.
Excellent. Thank you for that.
Through the chair, I was just wondering, thinking about this, would it not make sense rather than leaving it up to the special officers to look into this? If council put a motion on the floor to give staff the ability to make those decisions if someone phones in and asks without it coming to council or going to those guys for a minimum of 3 months, and then after that 3 months they'd have to reapply, but then it takes it out of the police officers' hands and puts it in to the staff that are receiving the phone calls to start with. They should be able to give that permission if the fellow phones and says, I need it as an office, I need it for, and the staff thinks that it works. I would be willing to put a motion on the floor to give staff that ability to make those decisions on 3 month increments.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm assuming that that recommendation that administration is bringing forward will include some provisions like that. But that's a good thought, Councillor Armstrong, for sure. So let's just wait and see. At this point, this is just we've only passed first reading for this bylaw, so there's no bylaw in place, regarding the parking of RVs. So it's not, this will become more of a concern if this bylaw goes to third and final reading. So we'll move to 2.2, ratify attendance.
Yeah, I'd like to ratify, sorry, I'm just pulling up. I'd like to ratify March 4th to 6th, the Canadian Badlands Tourism Development Conference. March 5th, council meeting with Siksika Council and Chief. March 17th, COVID-19 HS update for municipal mayors and reeves, which was a half day. The March 26th teleconference with Member of Parliament, Town of Drumheller and neighboring municipalities, and conference call for COVID-19 for Wheatland County and the ECDEV board conference. So again, that's the 4th, 5th, and 6th, the 17th, and the 26th.
Are there any other meetings that anybody requires to have ratified?
Scott here, just letting you know I'm in now in the conference.
Good morning, Deputy Reeve Clausen.
Good morning.
We're at 2.3 on our council agenda. It was an addition to ratify attendance.
Yeah, I caught the whole presentation there. I was in half of the other one as well, but thank you.
Excellent, thank you. Any discussion on the motion?
I have a couple of questions. Glenn here. The meeting with Siksika. The meeting with Siksika, when was that? What part of the day?
It was in the afternoon. So what I did on my timesheet was I just split. We were at the Canadian Badlands Conference, I think, from 7:30 in the morning till we had to leave shortly after lunch, I think around 1 o'clock. And then we returned to the Canadian Badlands Conference following that. So I did a half of a day for the conference and a half a day for Siksika. I just put the Siksika in because there was a small portion of mileage. We carpooled out to the meeting.
Okay, I'm okay with that then. And the teleconferences, I have a concern about. We've been to a lot of teleconferences. The way I view it is we're paid a salary, and that's for phone calls, reading, getting ready for meetings, that type of thing. The per diems is for going to meetings where you actually have a meeting type format and you're making decisions, that type of thing. So the teleconference is, and when I look at your report, it's more of information sharing, not much different than reading. I don't know how long they take, probably an hour, hour and a half, some of them. So I'm not really in favor of the teleconference meetings unless something comes out of them where there's a direct action has to be undertaken by the county. And I don't see that in either. So I'm against the teleconferences. I'll go for the Badlands because I'm thinking Amber is part of her committee work. It would be for Scott Calm, who went his alternates that aren't on the committee. I can go for that. I have some qualms about the 4th being a meet and greet and paying for that. Traditionally, we don't do that. We don't do it at RMA to go to hospitality rooms. I would caution charging, especially when it's your own backyard. If it was up in Edmonton, you had to drive up the day before and stay overnight to go to a meeting at 7 o'clock in the morning. That's a different story. But when you're just driving a few miles to go to it, and a time where we're not bringing back all our part-time workers or seasonal workers, not part-time, seasonal workers, people losing their jobs. I don't want to send a bad message out to the public. And thank you.
Yeah, and those are excellent questions, and this is why I'm bringing it to council, obviously, for consideration. I did also provide my council commitment, just a list, and I'm certainly not even asking for consideration of the vast majority of teleconferences I've done. I believe there was approximately 14 other teleconferences that I engaged in that I'm not even asking council to consider ratifying. I did ask for the 26th. I was in teleconferences from about 8:45 that morning till I believe about 3 o'clock that afternoon. So it was a fairly full day of literally going from one teleconference to another where I was obviously unable to do anything outside of sort of those hours. There were several other days where I was in sort of back-to-back teleconferences for good parts of the day. So it's totally at council's discretion. And duly noted all of the comments. There's a lot of questions, I think, about how we handle this time, and I respect your perspective for sure. Thank you.
Wilson here. I appreciate the comment as well. I will be supporting this motion as it was a full day. And I think it's up to each councillor's discretion. If they believe that council's being too generous, they can start, each individual councillor can start donating their time.
Through the chair to council, Ben Armstrong here. For the last, 4 years, I guess, as executive for SAWA, we've met once a month through teleconference, usually 2 to 2.5, sometimes 3 hours, along with our monthly board meeting. And I've been putting that down as a half day, whether it was in the morning or the afternoon, but I've still been putting it through as a half day as part of my committee work. So I think, as Glenn said, the local stuff, yeah, a lot of that with Drumheller Solid Waste, a lot of the phone calls I've had with Tammy and stuff, I'm not putting that down. I'm just putting it down as 1 month for my monthly. But I think, like Councillor Wilson said, it's a discretionary call. If you feel like you need it, put it in, and if it doesn't look right, then it can come back to council for ratification.
I'm sorry, Reeve Link, I'd like to add too that meet and greet and our presence at the Badlands, it was really necessary. It was in our area. We needed to know we have presentations the next day. Yeah, it may have been let's meet everybody, but we did discuss a lot about our area. It was important, I think, that council members were there, and I appreciate them being there.
Any other discussion? Is any councillor opposed to the motion?
Councillor Kester.
Thank you. Motion is carried. We'll move to our addition to our agenda 2.3, procurement, and I believe Councillor Eichert has something he would like to discuss.
In light of the current situation, we're finding out that an awful lot, if not the whole global food or supply chain, is going through China, and I believe that they have been, the country has been less than forthright and honest with the rest of the world about what is happening. So I would like to see, and it's a small thing, but I would like to see if the county can start going forward with trying to find alternates purchasing other than China. So I read today that there's a company in Vancouver that's going to start making, masks and all that kind of stuff. And I believe there'll be more of that. And I believe it's a small thing the county can do, but if we can source locally and then work out from there, like Canada first and then the US and then the world, and the last resort would be China. I would love to see if administration could bring an RFD forward to that deal. I understand that we're not a big player, but I think all municipalities are going to have to start looking at where we're buying our materials, and are we vulnerable with depending on other countries to supply our materials. So I think it's a small step, and I'm hoping it'll get people thinking. Thank you.
Discussion?
Just a comment on idea. I don't mind it if we look at it as a philosophy or an understanding, but I wouldn't like to see it put in a motion of any kind. Because if we know it's directly from another country, we can say no because of their whatever reasons. We won't support that. But we don't buy much from China. Most of ours is through distributors, and we have no control on where they buy their stuff. So if it's a philosophy that we ask staff to look at, I don't have a problem with that, but I would hate to see it in a motion.
Wilson here. No surprise, I support this motion. I think it's about time Western governments and the citizens themselves start paying attention to what's happening in those communistic countries. And I think I appreciate what Ben says, and I think I would hope that we already, to an extent, have that understanding. But just to make sure the greater public is aware, I think we do need it in a motion.
Well, I don't know how you would police that, how you would control that when so much of our stuff comes from outside of Canada. Like, it just, I don't know how you control it.
Glenn here. I agree with Ben. I think it's a philosophy. I think it's a philosophy that's going to grow coming out of this pandemic. people are going to react to it in their own ways after being isolated and see what's caused it. We buy most of our stuff. We go through the RMA. I don't know how much stuff we get parts for our cats and stuff. I don't know where they come from, but if they show up and they got made in China on it, what do? Set it aside or throw it out or return it and go without the part? I think it's too restricting. I think the philosophy thing is good. If you got a choice when you're ordering, yeah, pick the appropriate choice. But to put it in motion and more or less ban that purpose, I think that's too restricting and too early for it.
Can I chime in here? Everybody's.
Go ahead, Tom.
Okay. I think this just needs to be. It's an optical thing, and I believe that we could have staff bring forward an RFP that would state something to the lines that the Wheatland County Council approved the boycotting of products that are produced or manufactured in China and to be utilized in the Wheatland County operations wherever possible. I understand there are a lot of things that we can't change, but we have to get the perception out there. Where is this stuff coming from? And wherever possible, I think gives us an out on everything. Thank you.
And I don't know if that's the way to do it, or if we could do it oppositely, as that we are proud to buy Canadian, or we promote that we wherever possible buy Canadian, and try to promote buying Canadian instead of going the negative way and saying don't go there.
I agree with you, Donna, but you have to put, like, China is in the wrong. That has to be known. The public has to know that those are the bad guys. We can't just put it under the pillow. Oh, they're fine. They're just communists. They'll be friends with you. No, they have to know that those are bad people. Sorry, I'm done ranting. That's it.
Let's just make sure that our discussion remains respectful.
Yeah, I think anything we do has to be in a positive, Ben Armstrong, in a positive manner. The philosophy around it, I agree with, and we could put pressure on our representatives to RMA, our representatives to the provincial legislation, and our representatives to the federal legislations. But to put a motion in place, it ties the hands of our staff. What do they do when it comes in? Do they send it back? Do they throw it, like Glenn says, throw it out? We have to be careful how we make, because so much of it doesn't. It's not just China. There's other countries over there that we do business with, that their means of living and their means of dealing with their people is so far out of where we're going that. So do we do that with Iran, Iraq, all those different countries? I think it's more of a philosophy, and as long as our staff understands where we're coming from, and we use it to put pressure on our organizations that represent us on the worldwide market, I think that's a better way to go with it, rather than putting something hard and fast in motion. Once it's in motion and it goes forward, our staff have no choice. They have to. So it doesn't matter what it is. If it comes in and it's got that name on them, they throw it back, they throw it out. And I don't know how that would affect our operations at this time. I think we got to take it a little slower. But I do agree with the idea and the philosophy. So as long as it's that way, fine. But I won't be voting for a motion that says that we absolutely refuse anything that comes from China. I don't think we can do that.
Glenn here.
Oh,
sorry.
I just wanted to say that, don't get me wrong, I agree with the philosophy too. I totally agree with it.
I agree more with Donna's approach, buy Canadian. I farmed all my life. I've been subject to restrictions, government interference, and selling my products around the world. The latest was China and not buying canola. yet our pressures have been going full out to supply them with oil. It's an optics thing for China. What was more damaging was India and putting a 50% tariff on peas. And in a country, in an area right here where peas are growing extensively for a few years to supply them, and all of a sudden they slap that on. I like the idea of support Canada. Canada has gotten into the habit of supplying China with iron ore, coal, and we ship it over there and we bring a car back here. We're taking work away from our workers. We can process our own peas and make the protein, which is in high demand in the world. We can do that in Canada. But it's too easy for us to ship it off and let somebody else do the work. I support Made in Canada. I think is in banning something, we're no different than China. But supporting our population, supporting our workers, supporting our country, that's a philosophy. And I think that goes a long ways besides, no, we're going to put a fence up. We're not letting China in. They got a fence up. We'll build ours bigger, so on and so forth. I think it's a fight that bears no fruit.
So what are we going to do here? We're just going to push this down the road. We're not going to make any decision. We're going to say that China didn't mean to kill the Western economy. That's all fine and dandy. I mean, we don't have the courage to even put anything down on paper that we're going to try. We give this staff. Of course, we can't force the staff. We're not asking the staff. I'm not asking the staff to say if it's made in China, send it back. That's ridiculous. Everybody knows that 90% of the stuff we handle comes through China. But we have to do something here. We just can't go, oh yeah, well, we're gonna do this and do that. We weren't gonna put a motion on the floor that we're gonna buy Canadian. I can live with that one too. But it has to be pointed out that China is the bad guy here. We wouldn't be having this conversation if it wasn't for China. We would have masks for everybody in Canada if it wasn't for China. Like, we have to do something here. We just can't sit down there and go, no, we're not going to do anything, and we're not going to become like China. There's no moral comparison between us and China. That's it. I'm done.
Perhaps as sort of to take into account everybody's different perspectives, perhaps we could direct administration to look at our procurement policy and look if there is a way to integrate some of this discussion into our procurement policy and bring that back for council consideration. Thoughts on that?
Hi, Scott here. Just want to make a few comments. I understand where Tom's coming from, and Jason, I totally get the frustration. I also see it in the delivery world already. As recently as yesterday, some people are saying at grocery stores, for instance, they don't even want fresh fish anymore because they don't know where it's from. It's already happening at that level, and that will have more power than what we would have. I always support local first. I've always supported our own country first. Said that many times. I think we should be focusing on our own, and the way to get that to go is to get people to think a different way and to force the government to. So I'd like to have like a philosophy, like they say, as far as an out-and-out policy. We can look at that later on. Just something has to come back to us to see what it's like. But I think it's going to come irregardless. Thanks.
I agree, Scott. I think it's going to come. But what if we put something, I don't know how you'd put it. We have to talk about supporting our own country, but take that more to RMA as a whole province, because that this I don't know how we can make a stand right here, right now, as a small group. We're better off as telling our government what we want through RMA. But in saying that too, I have no idea how you would put that across as a thought to them and have it voted on.
Glenn here. Global trade is near and dear to my heart. Some of the biggest, for me, the biggest culprit in my years of farming was the Canadian government and the Canadian Wheat Board. Canola was not included in the Wheat Board grains because there was no canola during World War II. Canola market, we have some of the best, most efficient crushers in the world. The product is purchased here, grown here. It was developed here. It was made for Canada. We grew the crushers. We ship oil around the world and we compete globally for it. We grow the best wheat in the world. We had the Wheat Board and we couldn't sell it to anybody in Canada. We have subgrade wheat mills, flour mills. They're across the line in the US, just across the line. We couldn't even ship our grain across the line without going to jail. Now that's changed, but it takes years to get that infrastructure built, to get the mindset changed. Maybe a new flour mill will come along and be put up someplace, Saskatchewan. But we have to use the old infrastructure first. And it's the mentality of the people allowing government, China, I can understand. I'm frustrated out of that too. I'm frustrated with India. I'm also getting better with Canada since they took the Wheat Board away and the propaganda that went with it. The Crow benefit decimated the prairie provinces and propped up Ontario. In case in point, they took the Crow benefit away and they waited and they peed around long enough so there was no money left of the $8 billion that was in there. They had $1 billion left. We'll share it all up. I figured out that should pay for my grain shipping for 2 years. Okay. And I finally get a check. I couldn't even pay for my grain shipping for a quarter of it. That's how they decimated that fund. I'm still in favor of it. I didn't care much because it took it away and Alberta's beef industry grew to what it is today. Before the Crow benefit was on, and when we had the Crow benefit, the beef industry in Alberta was not like it was. We didn't have any packers. We didn't have a Cargill. So if we're going to go pointing fingers, all we're doing is building fences. Start the mentality, same as the Wheat Board. Change the people, buy local. I've supported local my whole life. I don't even price shop when I buy anything. I just go to town. And if that store is gone, I go to Strathmore. And sometimes Drumheller. I don't ask for a price. I just buy it. And they'll send me a bill. And it's a philosophy. I'm not into fence building. I've done that all my life too. And all it does is, I'm in support of buy Canadian, support the Canadians.
So what about this? If we put some kind of thing together saying, Wheatland County is proud to buy Canadian-made products wherever possible.
Yeah, I think I definitely would support that. I have pulled up our policy, it's General Policy Section 3.1, Sustainable Ethical Procurement Policy for Goods and Services. And it does speak to, right in the second paragraph under procurement goals and objectives, it already states Wheatland County will purchase goods and services that meet the highest possible environmental and ethical standards where practical. And then it goes on under, sorry, I'm just moving around. It does go on to, my apologies. Under standards of conduct, under the responsibilities, it does speak to environmental and social responsibilities, where staff shall exercise their responsibilities in a manner that promotes and provides opportunities for the protection and preservation of the natural environment. Staff shall favor the use and distribution of resources in an efficient, effective, and ethical manner. Staff will be cognizant, and this is where I think we could integrate something in about choosing Canadian first. Staff will be cognizant of the social rights extended to all people, including the conventions with respect to labor standards, and will encourage and support supplier diversity. These attributes of sustainability should guide members in their decisions and in implementing the policies and values of Wheatland County. So personally, I would support a direction to direct administration to integrate something into this policy regarding sourcing Canadian goods first. I just think we do want to be a little bit careful. I support what Councillor Kester was saying. I mean, we don't want to put ourselves in a position where we're not able to procure replacement filters for our graders, or something that we can only source through China or a less kind of ethical market. But I think we could integrate something into this policy. So I don't know if there's not a motion on the floor. I'm not sure, Councillor Eichert, if you want to put a motion on the floor, just asking staff to bring something back for council consideration.
Glenn here again. Probably get tired of hearing from me. I agree with Tom. We need to put something out there so people know. We got a policy and we got it hid back in the back papers of the internet someplace, and staff's going to check the box for Canada if we got a choice. That's operational. What do we do to support? What would be wrong with we've got WC Infinite, or I just forget the exact wordage or verbiage. What would be wrong with having a Canadian flag? Proud to be Canadian, or we buy Canadian. Support Canada. We have healthcare workers. I can tell you at the lodge, those workers are doing a phenomenal job. Their stress they're under is immense. When they read the paper, or every day there's another home, people dying because the virus got in. They are working, they're not complaining, though they're scared. But they're the Canadian values. What would be wrong with making a statement that we are proud Canadians and we support Canada and we'll buy Canadian when the opportunity arises? I think that's, if I'm wrong, and if I am, but I'm thinking Tom wants to be able to send a message out that we're against the global order of trade right now, and I'm definitely against it. I believe we can participate. We have the innovation, we have the brain power, we have the resources, and we probably have the money if we want to do it. We have the will. Just let the government get out of the way and let us do what we do best. So something like proud Canadian, put a Canadian flag up on our letterhead. Yeah,
I will not be putting up a Canadian flag on our letterhead until they give back $20 billion of equalization a year.
I think we're starting to get outside. I agree with some of what Glenn is saying, and Amber, I think we send it back to the staff and let them bring something forward. You got to remember also that in a lot of cases, to make it Canadian made, all they have to do is bring it in and change the packaging, and it's packaged as Canadian made. So it may make you feel good in the tummy, but you're still purchasing from outside the area. We're the philosophy of supporting local, I agree with that 100%, and buying Canadian when possible, I agree with that 100%. But I think it's when our staff are the ones that have to do it, it's easy for me to sit back and say, do this, but our staff have to be the ones that keep this equipment running and keep the office running and everything else. I don't want to tie their hands with it, but I think the philosophy of what we're talking about, yeah, if we put a statement out there that we're proud to be Canadian and that we will support Canada whenever we can, I don't have an issue with that.
It's Tom here. Said I wouldn't cut in, but I'm going to again. I want staff to have the ability, like if they're buying PPE, that if they can buy Canadian and American-made PPE as opposed to foreign overseas-made PPE, and it costs more money than what the cheapest thing is, I'm good with that. But it's going to cost more money in order to buy Canadian, quote unquote, because these companies will not be able to. You can't produce on the scale of what they're doing in an overseas market. So I'm good with sending it back to administration. Let them look at their procurement policies and bring back what the information is, whether it's going to cost money, how much more money it's going to cost, and all that kind of stuff. I'm good with that. Thank you.
So make that motion.
Okay, I'll make the motion that we direct administration to look into our procurement policies and I don't know, torchlight, shine on what can be done differently in order to keep as much of our purchases onshore as possible. Will that work?
There's a motion on the floor. Is there any further discussion?
Yeah, I think the motion can go forward. I don't have an issue with that. When it comes back, when the staff brings it back, then we can discuss the hell out of it at that time.
Agreed. I'll call the question. Is any councillor opposed? Motion is carried. Thanks for bringing that up for discussion, Councillor Eichert. We'll move to page 52 of our council package, Reeves report. The report's before you. I'll just highlight a couple of things. The Canadian Badlands Tourism Conference was excellent. It was a really good opportunity to liaison with lots of other municipalities that are also part of the Canadian Badlands, as well, to hear from different levels of government and initiatives that are going forward regarding tourism, and as well an excellent opportunity to hear from the businesses that are working in our municipality regarding on tourism projects. We had an excellent first meeting with Siksika Nation Chief and Council, and since then I have been in touch with Councillor Ruben Breaker a couple of times regarding some ways that we can work together, particularly through this pandemic, and we will continue to work with them going forward, just like all of our other neighbors. One thing to note with Community Futures Wild Rose, we did with regret accept the resignation of our general manager. So we have been actively recruiting and looking to hire a new general manager, which is somewhat more challenging in this environment, but we're making it work. Had a good visioning meeting with the consultant for the CMRB and got some good messaging across there. We have had a couple of teleconferences with MLA here just to keep up to date on what's happening provincially, and then also to share our priority areas from Wheatland County. We continue to request that our MLAs join their voices with ours regarding the CMRB. And further to that, another letter did go to MLA Ahir's MLA Ahir's office, just reiterating our concerns with the CMRB. Lots of information coming out just about how to best handle the COVID-19 and the pandemic and the municipal kind of responsibilities through that, and how best we can both communicate and just support our ratepayers and our businesses. I am hoping I'm going to, well, I guess we'll deal with my report first. We will discuss the WSPSF attachments that were attached to my report. We're also having good regional conversations. Mayor Colberg with the town of Drumheller and her municipal staff have been facilitating quite a wide regional weekly conversation just around ways that we can sharing best practices, but also if there needs to be any regional collaboration in dealing with this in the future, particularly if there's, staffing shortages in certain municipalities or essential service shortages with workers, things like that. Obviously, there are still some differences between kind of necessary urban responses and a rural response, but it's good to hear what both urban and rural neighbors are doing in response to this. I think the province has been doing an exceptional job at communicating both with us as a municipality, but also just with residents of Alberta. With that, I will move that my report be accepted as presented and happy to answer any questions.
Just a question, Amber. Jason here. You talked about regional communication with town of Drumheller. Just curious if you've been in contact with the town of Strathmore as they are within our boundaries as well, or if they're just being rough.
I reached out. I did send an email to Mayor Fuel, just indicating that we're hoping, that we can collaborate in any way, support each other where necessary. There are a couple of communication things that I would like to discuss with Mayor Fuel, but I'm also very cognizant that, it's an extremely busy time and we're all under a lot of sort of pressure through this trying time. So, and I did communicate just when I saw some, when I very first saw some of the geospatial data, just to make sure that their municipality was aware. So definitely reaching out and trying to keep those communications flowing.
So just to further that, how long has it been since?
Sorry, you'll have to repeat. There's some background noise.
Yeah, can everybody mute their phone? Because somebody's laughing. Yeah, just to further that question, how long has it been since you reached out and there hasn't been a reply back? Hello.
I'm here. I just was muting in case there was something here. I'm just looking through my emails. I did email Mayor Fuel March 17th, and he did respond after I sent some geospatial data indicating that he had seen that data as well. So.
But that's the only conversation you've had, and you've had more conversation with the town of Drumheller.
Well, the town of Drumheller has set up that teleconference. They've pulled in, I didn't count how many municipalities, but I feel like somebody said maybe there were 16 different municipalities in on that conference call. Sometimes it's staffing, often it's municipally elected officials. Ben was the one that first alerted me to that teleconference and, to that connection. And so when I reached out to Mayor Colberg, she said it was something she was considering doing. So I'm not sure if the town of Strathmore has been invited to that teleconference as well. I'd have to look. I do have a list of attendees, but I don't recall hearing the town of Strathmore.
Whoever's listening, I'm making a point of showing that the town of Strathmore has not tried to communicate any major issues with their closest neighbor.
Hello, Amber.
Okay. Yes.
When you're these I don't know what they are, town hall meetings or when Drumheller's conducting these meetings. Are there some that are just councillors there, or is it all mayors and reeves?
I believe it's all mayors and reeves. If you just give me a moment, I can pull up the attendance sheet.
Not that I need to know precisely. I'm just thinking if in the future, if it's more of an open type thing, to if you could include me, because I have quite a few ratepayers. That's where they go, is Drumheller, up along the number 9 and down into Rosebud, all the way straight across to Ben's area. That whole area there is Drumheller, and that's where I first heard about these conferences. It was Kohlberg had reached out, and there was people in Rosebud that were on it, and I wasn't aware of it. So if any of these more open sessions come along, please let me know so I can tune in. Thanks. Just a request.
Yeah, no, for sure. If you want to, I can forward you an email address if you want to email the town of Drumheller. I know Ben was on the first teleconference, I believe. Ben, please correct me if I'm wrong. I think because of your...
Yeah, I tried to get in on the first one, but their line was overloaded and they couldn't get on, and I wasn't available for the second one. But I'm on there because the Drumheller Solid Waste is within the town boundaries, and they're under that emergency. So they put me on there because of Drumheller Solid Waste more than as a counselor. But it was nice of them, and I appreciate it. And I think where Jason's coming from, I think Strathmore is doing some of the same things, but they're not including any of their neighbors. They're kind of treating it as an island. That's right, I think.
Yeah, so in terms of follow-up, Glenn, I will send you the email address. We have increased the capacity. Actually, Wheatland County is providing our conference line. CAO Brian Henderson has provided that for the Drumheller's use, just because we have more capacity than they initially did on the teleconference system that they were using. Like Ben said, there was a number of people that weren't able to get onto the first call. So we can absolutely get you connected in, Glenn, and you can join in. It's weekly on Thursdays. So I'll make sure I get that to you. I'm making a note right now.
Okay, thank you. Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. Any other questions?
Madam Reeve, just a point. I just reviewed the minutes from the previous Thursday meeting with the town of Drumheller, and there was 13 municipalities that participated in that call.
Perfect. Thank you. Do you have that attendance list? It might say too if it's Reeves or councillors, or I'm just not actually finding it on my messy desk right now.
Yes, I will forward that on to council, but it is kind of a mix of mayors, Reeves, and CAOs. So I'll send this out to council right now.
Yeah, that's what I had recalled. And you know what, in terms of the communication with Strathmore, I'm happy to reach out again and just see if there are ways that we can collaborate better. I think that's always a two-way responsibility. I did send that initial email to Mayor Fuel, but I haven't specifically followed up on that. So I can take some responsibility for doing that as well.
And just a note as well, administration, like we're discussing, we do have communications open with the town on various levels. It just may be lacking on an elected official kind of basis to basis that way.
Oh,
excellent.
Just for information, I've got the list here, and there's CAOs, there's directors of emergency management, there's mayors, there's Reeves, special areas, MLAs from Drumheller, Crowfoot. Yeah, so it's a mix of a lot of them.
Yeah, and I've never gotten the sense that it's at all, a closed group. So I'm sure anybody who would like to is welcome to join in on that. So I'll make sure that I get Councillor Custer connected in on that. Any other questions regarding my report? If not, I have a motion on the floor to approve my report. Is any councillor opposed? Motion is carried. I did also ask that the WFCSS correspondence from Chair Joe Peterson be included in the council package under my report. Donna and I both sit on WFCSS, and at our last meeting, we had first a finance committee meeting prior to that, and then the board meeting, and we do have a draft budget that has been included. And as well, there is a letter outlining the request for an additional 15% of funding for WFCSS. This is included in our operations budget. In fact, there's slightly more that was included in our draft operations budget because there was a kind of a cost of living increase that had been integrated in. We did not integrate any cost of living into our overall WFCSS budget. So in terms of numbers, Wheatland County's required contribution is $55,539.50. And then the WFCSS board is asking for an additional $33,323.70, which is a 15% increase ask. It is the same as what we requested last year. And this funding is primarily utilized for our indirect programs, which are dispersed out through the community. So basically the premise of WFCSS is that the provincial government recognizes that local governments are best poised to make decisions around these programs in our communities. And the model that our FCSS works on is basically providing that funding to local organizations to meet those needs and deliver those services that are required. I am looking for a specific motion just because the WFCSS board did not feel comfortable announcing kind of those indirect funding decisions or providing that funding to our indirect organizations until we know that that funding is in place. So I would ask that council consider, I'll move that Wheatland County Council consider providing the required funding plus the 15% funding that is allocated in our operating budget for WFCSS. And I'm happy, Donna and I are happy to answer any questions.
Madam Reeve, Brian from administration. Maybe just a point of clarification to your resolution. You may want to include the exact amount of the requisition. So the exact amount of the requisition would be $88,863.
Thank you, Brian. Absolutely.
Excuse me. That's not a requisition. That's a contribution, right? FCSS doesn't have requisitioning powers. We can opt, this is our formal letter to opt into, again, as we have in the past, into FCSS. It's a voluntary thing. So yeah,
yes,
I'm in
correct.
favor of it. It's not a requisition. And yeah, I support the additional 15%, the 33,000. I think that would do you good to include both numbers in your resolution, but it's not a requisition. This is a contribution. We're endeavoring to help our community. Thanks.
So would this not be just a motion for the 15%, because the other funding, if you don't want to put that in, you have to give a year's notice for pulling out of it, and we're in it, so that money's already going forward. We have nothing to do with that. This is just a motion on the 15%.
Yeah, that likely works.
I'm thinking you have to have a motion every year to be in. I know it's 6 months or whatever to get out of the FCSS. I think they require a motion every year. When Strathmore got out, it was less than a year. I remember that wound.
But
I'm pretty sure you could be right, Ben.
Once the motion is on the floor that we stay in, that we pay that funding. We can't get out of that unless we put a motion on the floor that says we're pulling out of, and we have to meet their timeline. So that money, I think, is already designated. I don't think we can get out of that. I think all we're worried about is the extra 15%.
Yeah, and just for clarity, indirectly to a certain extent, there was some debate over whether we needed to necessarily bring a resolution on this. I'm just bringing it for absolute transparency. Council did approve funding in excess of the 88,000. I don't have the budget in front of me, but I believe it was around 90,000 in our interim operating budget. I just, for the utmost of clarity and just for confidence in the WFCSS budgeting, I just wanted to make sure that that funding was still going to be there in our final operating budget. So yeah, it's an excellent point. It's not a requisition. The way the program is set up, the province determines the committed provincial contribution, and then 25 cents per committed provincial dollar, which represents 20% of the total sum. It's a little bit confusing when you look at it, but the province sets a required contribution for each municipality to FCSS, which is basically a proportionate matching to what the province provides. So, and then just to be ultra clear, the WFCSS board is asking for an over and above contribution of 15%, just like we did last year. And that's not all municipalities do that, but many municipalities do that just to support this social side of the services that the municipality provides. So just to be clear, the motion would be to contribute $88,863 to Wheatland FCSS.
I won't be supporting this motion, as I believe we are trying, whether we budgeted for it or not, for an excess funds going to WFCSS. We have a chance to come in under budget. And I believe if we can't invest into our own municipality through infrastructure projects that have a larger benefit to the local economy and has an investment back, we have investment back from the infrastructure projects, I don't think we should be funding social programs either. We're in one of the worst, if not the worst, financial period of Canadian history. We can no longer just keep throwing money away. We are giving what we are owed, and I can't afford an extra 15% going to WFCSS when we're having trouble building playgrounds for our kids and infrastructure projects for businesses in our county that's going to create jobs. So I can't support that.
Any other comments?
I'm just full of them today. I support the 15%. I strongly support FCSS. They are there to help the ones that are least able to help themselves. And I don't know if I'll use it anyway. I'll use it for my plug. Just Strathmore FCSS has donated $500 to the lodge to do with, in this time of pandemic and all the fear and uncertainty it creates, to be used by the lodge in whatever way they see fit. No, I strongly support the FCSS. I've always have. And it's $33,000. You can't buy a road, you can't buy a bridge for $33,000. You can't even buy a playground for $33,000. But that $33,000 with the FCSS and the management team they have there goes a long ways in supporting our seniors and supporting the ones who need the care the most. I strongly support it.
Any other comments? I'll call the question. Is any councillor opposed?
Yes, Wilson.
Motion is carried. We'll move to page 69 in the council package. Deputy Reeves' report.
Hi there, my report's in the package. Any questions, please ask. If not, I'll make a motion to accept this information.
Any questions for Deputy Reeves-Clausen? Is any councillor opposed? Motion is carried. We'll move to Division 1 councillor report.
Yeah, Wilson here. There isn't a lot for me to report on as ASB is looking to postpone their meeting, and only other committee meeting I've had is Handybus. Sorry, I'm a little out of breath from pacing for the last 2 hours because that's what I do when I'm on the phone. I'll just kind of go over what the Handybus is planning to do. There's been, we are having a meeting tomorrow at 2 o'clock to discuss the potential of applying for the, I'm just pulling up the correct wordage here. The Alberta government emergency social servicing funding for COVID. It's a $30 million funding program, which is available to any organization that helps address the immediate needs of their community related to COVID, such as staff wages, mileage, insurance, and other soft costs. With this funding, if we apply for it, we will also be using it to increase services to pick up prescriptions and possibly groceries at a discounted price. As I said, we don't know for sure. It's going to be decided tomorrow. So that's how the Handybus is going to operate, hopefully in the next coming months. We have limited our usage to only 2 clients, as those are the only 2 clients that were deemed by AHS to be an essential service. They are going to Calgary for medical appointments. So just an FYI, nothing else for me. I'll gladly answer any questions about the Handybus. Don't know if I'll be able to answer them because this is all new since the last meeting. If there's no questions, I'll move my report. I talked to Russ last week. We are hoping to have a conference call ASB meeting in the coming weeks. We were hoping to have one this week, but something came up for us. So expect it soon. It'll be kind of within a few days. It'll be a spur of the moment kind of deal. So keep it in mind. If there's no questions, I'll move my report as read.
Is any councillor opposed? Motion is carried. Division 3 councillor report.
Yes, everything's there. A lot more happening before, and then not so much after the 10th for everybody else here, I'm sure. The Canadian Badlands conference went over very well. We're having a conference meeting tomorrow, and yeah, I'm just going. If there's no questions, I'll move my report as read.
I'll congratulate you on your nomination as president for Canadian Badlands.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Is any councillor opposed? Motion is carried. We'll move to Division 4, Councillor report.
Yeah, the report is in the package. Everything, I think everything else has been covered by previous councillors. The only thing I'd like to bring up, and because it's pertaining to the CMRB. We didn't have a CMRB meeting in March, but it came out of the one that was held very early April. I'd like to just a small discussion. I'd like to direct administration to get the numbers together on how much we spend on CMRB. Bruce McAllister, who I believe runs, I think it's called Rocky View 2020, has been very vocal about government waste and believing that the CMRB is in fact one of these things that's government waste. And the CTF, the Canadian taxpayers, are contemplating putting together a news release on the wastage of it, and I'd really like to get it out there, how much we're spending every year on CMRB and the amount of people that we have in the area. So like the high per capita amount we're spending, and we are seeing no results. The whole thing breaks down to, as we saw in the last meeting, which I'll probably bring up next month again, is the voting is all broken down along the lines of who the city of Calgary is providing servicing for. And we cannot, especially in these fiscal times, we cannot afford the amount of money, time, and effort that goes into us belonging to this organization that will have absolutely no potential for us for the next probably 40 or 50 years. So I think I'd like to bring out that discussion, and I don't know if if the rest of everybody has to weigh on this. Feel free to do that, and if we can just have the discussion, and if anybody has any questions, I'll table my report at this time also. So thank you.
So I'm not sure for process. I know administration has analyzed our investment in CMRB. We've utilized that for correspondence with our MLAs and that type of thing. I'm not sure if we would need a motion to have that be publicized.
At this point, don't table your motion. Don't table your report.
Yeah. Move to approve. Let's just deal with the CMRB conversation first. I'm not sure if administration can weigh in if we would need a motion if an external party, if we wanted to provide our funding levels that we have been investing in CMRB at this point.
No, actually, and my apologies. Councillor Eichert had asked that question earlier, and I just neglected to get back to him. So in 2019, the county spent approximately $140,000 of staff time on CMRB efforts. And in 2018, we spent upwards of about $100,000. So kind of a rough estimate for 2018 and 2019, not including 2020, is about $250,000.
Thank you. So that's public information now, Councillor Eichert. So if somebody is interested in accessing that, they can just access this council meeting, and that's public information. And a motion to approve your report?
Yeah, thank you very much for that, and I'll move that my report be moved.
Any further questions? Is any councillor opposed? Motion is carried. Division 6 councillor report.
Yeah, good morning. My report's there. Just a quick note on Wademza. They're doing a fantastic job. They are making calls, although their call volumes are down. Their calls are more, I can't say, they're more of the emergency type nature. the emergency rooms in the hospital. Though I haven't been in them, I hear they're a lot quieter than has been the rule. So people are just using the ambulance for emergency calls. Of course, there's less traffic on the road, so that portion of the business is down. With DEMSA, we take great care and we provide the best ambulances up to a limit to what we can afford. They're usually better equipped than what's in AHS. And with our recent office renovations, we've got security protocols in there, and anybody who wants in there has to get through double locked doors now, so they can get in if they're opened to the outer chamber, which allows them to see in, but that there's a glass wall there. And also the hall is equipped with, I think it's a peroxide atomizer, and we've had it for a few years, and it runs and it can disinfects the whole building, the whole hall, and they even put it in the ambulance. So yeah, they're doing extra cleaning, extra practicing, donning and doffing their protective equipment. So yeah, they're doing a great job. Wheatland Housing, yes, they are doing a great job too. They have policies in place. We're ahead of, I won't say ahead of the curve. Yeah, we got nobody in there with the COVID now. But we've had policies in place before the province even come down with any. So we're ahead of, and we're probably, I'll say, within the top 2% in the province of being getting our policies there. They're currently working on policies in case something else happens. Dr. Joni is been a great source of information for the staff. The staff are, they're working hard, but they're feeling the pressure too. And we've recently given them a little bit of a bonus. I don't know what the future holds, but as a board, we're solidly behind them. And also there was a teleconference. I don't think it's on my thing here. I just put numerous phone calls. And from Dr. Pon, not Dr. Minister Pon, on care in the province. And it was mostly questions by operators in the province. It was very good. I provided a written comment, and I don't know if I sent it out to council. I was making a comment for the board members. I'll check back. Maybe I don't think I sent it out when I'm thinking on it. I think I'm not as computer savvy as I should be on getting everybody's contacts up. I'll send it out too. But the highlight of the conference call, if I can call it a highlight, is how well or how prepared we are, better prepared we are than a lot of people that were asking questions. So heads up, they're working very hard. And that bus that we bought for the lodge, I think it's making, on good days, 2-3 trips a day. The bus has been declared or is part of the quarantine of the building. Only it can be locked. Only certain people are allowed on it. So they take about 3 or 4 seniors at a trip to keep the social distancing and the amount of people in. And they give them a tour around Strathmore for sure. I don't know how far they went out. I'm not sure. Maybe they went to Nightingale. I just can't remember for sure what all their bus trips are, but it's something they're doing. So I'm very proud of the lodge. If there's any questions, I'll answer them. If not, I'll move my report.
Yeah, just a question, Glenn, about the lodge. I haven't talked to you since that first meeting in, I think it was March or even February about it. How was the board, were they happy that we matched the funding of Strathmore? I haven't heard anything yet. Were they happy about it?
I've talked to the mayor about that in Strathmore. At first I can't say they were happy. They're happy that the county is supporting the lodge. The amount, it's a start. I don't know what the future brings for the lodge. Of course, not too many people want to be talking about new build right now or making plans. We haven't heard. Our application is in for planning funding and haven't heard. Everything I've been told is up to date. Minister Lelik's confirmed that, so that part's still on. But the funding for the lodge, the build of the new lodge, that's all on. I don't want to say it, but we'll wait and see till we get further direction from the province. But no, they didn't boo or anything like that. I'm thinking there'll be more conversations about that into the future. Does that answer your question? Probably not. But no cheering and no booing. Yeah.
Yeah, I know what you mean. It's as good as you can answer at the moment, I believe.
Yeah, no booing, no cheering. Just thank you.
Any other questions? Is any councillor
one
opposed?
other
Go
thing,
ahead,
Amber,
sir.
maybe.
Of course.
We've been having teleconference meetings. I talked it over with Vicky, and they're extremely busy in there. Staff of Vicky, I won't name them. She's the CAO. She has a couple of other staff members and they are taking on extra duties. Since the lockdown, family can't come in and visit their loved ones, but they can make drop-offs. So some of them drop off, I don't know, tuna salad or salads, pitchers, whatever. They're family things meant for their families, and they come to the front door and they push the doorbell and people have to go get. That has turned into maybe on weekends and when we're short-staffed, the cooks are just in. So they're there to help with that. They're there to help monitor and be there as a source for weekends. So they're splitting up their shifts. So they didn't maybe be in at the weekend so much or after hours, but that is changing. And as the dynamics of care improve, their shifts will be more staggered. I don't have a problem with it. All of those leaders in there have all proven themselves in the past. They're very capable of doing that. We were down, I believe, we were down 5. We might be down 6 rooms now. Unfortunately, during the lockdown, any room vacates for whatever reason, to go to the hospital, move to a different, maybe they go home to their family. We can't really bring anybody in. It's just too risky. In the future, if it has to be, we can maybe go in and lock them down. So we're down at least 5 rooms right now. So that affects our budget more than the bonus said, that's for sure. It's going to be a hit, but there's nothing else we can do. It's just the sign of the times, and I just wanted council to know how they're meeting the challenge. I won't say they're winning in every way that you can expect them to be winning, but this pandemic it's its own choice, its own it'll choose the direction it wants to go and it'll be out of our hands, but they're taking every precaution. Thanks.
Thanks, Councillor Kester. There's a motion on the floor. Is there any other discussion? Is any councillor opposed? Motion is carried. Division 7 report.
Yeah, good morning, thank you. Sorry I didn't get one in, but I wasn't doing much other than phone conferences this month. SEWA has been awarded a CARES grant, the amount of $45,372 to start their energy from waste economic outreach study and report that has to be done to move forward. So they're moving ahead on that one. And Sherry, our administrator, is still looking for more granting in the range of around $1 million. Hopefully she can get that all together so that they can start doing the other studies and the work that needs to be done. So that's moving along. Drumheller solid waste. The solid waste side's moving along fine. There's a few little glitches, but they seem to be working themselves out. The recycle program, it's still shut down. We may have to revisit that here in the next month or so. Things may be starting to pile up, but as long as ratepayers know that if anything that's recyclable, that's small enough, they can put it in bags and throw it in the trans stores. And we'll be landfilling it for now, but. In a lot of cases, the operators at the sites aren't accepting loose. It's got to be bagged. So if they can throw it in a bag, that's fine. If not, I know I talked to one fella in Hazard that's getting a pile of cardboard that he can't take out there because it's piling up on him. And I said, well, if he can box it there, crush it and keep it in one of his buildings until we can take it, that's fine. If it has to go out into the open, then he may as well throw it in the bag and garbage it. But I'm afraid we will be landfilling a lot of this stuff until this is over. But that's the nature of the beast nowadays, I guess. So we will keep moving along. Other than that, I have nothing really to report. Things seem to be working themselves out in one way or another. If there's no questions, I'll move my report.
Any questions? Is any councillor opposed? Motion is carried. We'll move to page 74 of our council package, Chief Administrative Officer report.
Yes, good morning, Madam Reeve. So on page 74 is the CAO report. Just a couple things to note. So early to mid-March, we did a lot of business continuity planning. So what that involved is just meeting with various departments and just identifying critical services, just so we could continue our operations and just maintain service levels to the public as best as possible. On March 18th, we closed down all of our buildings for public access. During that time, we also, during the closure, we created some standard operating safety operating procedures for public work staff to return to normal work duties, which was this week actually. So they're kind of back up and going, just with social distancing, disinfecting equipment. We've also increased the disinfecting on our public works building where there is more foot traffic than any other building, just due to the nature of machinery coming in for repairs and maintenance. Another big project that the county is currently undertaking is working with GFL for the removal of the legacy materials from the compost site north of Strathmore. So the actual removal of legacy material started last Thursday. So what's happening is that they're sending us daily reports. Those daily reports indicate the amount of metric tonnage that they're removing from the site per day. So that varies from day to day, but it usually ranges between about 125 to 150 metric tons per day of material, of legacy material that's being removed from the site. So far over the course of 3 days, they have moved approximately 400 tons off the site. I was out there on Friday and kind of just observed activity, and it did seem like it was going fairly well. We have been sending those daily reports out to ratepayers, the adjacent landowners, I should say, sorry. And then all of that information is also available on our website for anyone to view. And then also just to note that dust control has been applied to the haul route for where the legacy material is going. There was some complaints late last week, just when the removal process started, just to do with dust. And when I was out there on Friday, it was very dusty. So the dust abatement has been applied. It was applied on Monday, and then a second layer was applied today. They had just missed one resident, so we wanted to get out there to make sure that they were their needs were met.
Yeah, Brian, to interrupt.
Yep.
Are we going to build that back to GFL? The cost
yes, so part of the plan that was approved by administration had a road use agreement in it. And within that road use agreement, there is a clause that the operator must pay for dust control that's put down on the haul route. If that makes sense. And yes, we will be sending them an invoice.
Thank you.
Yep. And then we are moving forward with hiring the manager of emergency and fire services. So that's one position that is moving forward. It is a critical position that we do need. We're currently staffing that department with Vern Elliott. He's our interim fire chief and emergency management. He's also working with our senior peace officer, Chris Pierman, on that as well. And also just to note, from a discussion earlier in council today, there's actually a policy committee that has been formed over the last, I'm going to say, month and a half probably, and we're actually reviewing all policies within Section 3, and that does include the procurement policy as well. So the comments today will be taken into consideration when drafting that policy for council review. Those policies, I think the majority of them were kind of done in either, a lot of them were done in 2010 and 12, so we're just kind of going through a revamp, updating them just for council consideration so they can be implemented. And then the last thing I just want to report on is the new council package. We have budgeted for and implemented the e-scribe package, so a lot of work kind of went into this package. There's definitely still some efficiencies to be found, and we'll kind of smooth those out as we go through the next couple council meetings. So we're pretty happy with how it's worked out so far. We're just still tweaking a little bit. So you'll see the new format today, and hopefully it just gets a little bit smoother with signature pages and just various boxes being filled out. So, and I believe that's all I have.
Excellent, thank you. Any questions regarding the CAO report?
Scott here, not a question, just a comment. Really appreciate the information sharing with the residents with the GFL. So far, it's been fairly quiet, and I do know they appreciate the information going back and forth, and that's exactly what it needs to move forward. So I appreciate that. Thank you.
And just another thank you on behalf of council. We're just so grateful for you and your team and the way you've been planning and implementing all the measures and the public health measures and business continuity planning. And you and your team have done an exceptional job of maintaining essential services and ensuring that our staff are safe. So thank you for that. Any other questions? A motion to accept his information?
Also move.
Councillor Bigger has moved. Any further discussion? Is any councillor opposed? Motion is carried. We'll move to page 77 for the Corporate and Financial Services report.
Yes, so on page 77 is the Corporate and Financial Services monthly report. Just a couple things to note. The assessment is finalized, and we have an assessment 101 presentation following this report. This is kind of going to go through the assessment values of the county for 2019 used for 2020 tax year purposes. The financial statement audit is pretty much complete, so that I believe all the information has been sent over to our new auditors, MNP. And then after that, we're going to work on the annual MFIR report. There was an extension granted by the province just due to the COVID-19 pandemic, but we don't need it. We've just been on schedule. So our finance staff has been doing an excellent job with that. And we're also reviewing our operating and capital budgets as well, just to bring back to council. So we're just kind of doing some fine tweaking. The capital budget, we definitely had a lot of input. So that will be brought back relatively quickly. And then the operating one, we're just kind of waiting on just a few final changes and just finalizing a few things before we can kind of make those adjustments. In our IT department, our IT manager did a lot of business continuity planning. So he was in charge of setting everyone up to work remotely from home, the staff that could anyways. So a lot of the administration offices. And then in our human resources department, they're still working on the benefit provider. So I did mention in a previous council meeting that we were going to most likely end up switching benefit providers just due to some aggressive bids, and there was some significant cost savings with that. That is still moving forward, and we most likely will have a new benefit provider on or around May 1st. And that's all I have for the report.
Sorry. Any questions regarding the corporate and financial services report? A motion to accept.
Just one. Sorry. Did you say a new benefit provider, Brian?
Yes, that's correct. So when I'd say every couple years, we have a benefit broker who ends up taking out all of our, benefits out to market just to make sure that we are receiving the best possible price for what we're receiving. Throughout that process in January, February, when we had the opportunity to renew, we determined that there was a kind of a big cost savings out there for us. The reasons why, I'm not quite sure. That's not quite my specialty area. And then anyways, the kind of the cost savings, I believe it was over an 18-month period, could be just over $300,000. We do recognize that it is it's definitely a difficult time. However, we have been assured by our broker that there will be no lapse in benefits. We have reviewed the benefits kind of on a line-by-line basis. They're very, very comparable. So we decided just as administration just to kind of move forward with this, just because it is a time we do realize distressing for staff. However, we do also realize that we do need to move forward with this just based on the cost savings alone. There is a substantial cost savings just for us that we wouldn't have to pass on through raising taxation kind of thing. So that was one thing that we wanted to move forward with.
Okay, I've been hearing grumblings of our present provider, and just to highlight it, with DEMSA, we have a week of sick days, and then after a week, the staff there pay into short-term disability. So if you suspecting you got COVID, you phone 811 and you tell them, and they say, I don't know if they'll say they're trying as frontline workers to get them tested as soon as possible, and then if they check clear and their symptoms leave, they could return back to work because they're frontline workers. But at any rate, some of them go by the week and their short-term disability runs out. Not short-term disability kicks in, and their sick days, 7 sick days that WDEMSA funds runs out, and then they should be on short-term disability. They're being denied, and they're told to go on employment insurance. That's not happening at WDEMSA. WDEMSA is continuing to pay them as if they're on sick days. But we've been paying into this short term, and as for the most part, it works pretty good if they get a sick while on the job, a strained back, or it's a high, I won't say a high or serious rate, but from the lifting involved and the long hours, there can be some situations where they use short-term disability. But I would think this is one of the instances that should be a no-brainer. Yeah, take a look at that. I don't think that's right. So yeah, I was going to phone you about that, but now I won't have to.
Any other questions or comments regarding the corporate and financial services report? A motion to approve or accept as information?
I'll move.
Councillor Kester has moved. Any further discussion? Is any councillor opposed? Motion is carried. We'll move to Assessment 101 presentation.
Good morning, everybody. Dennis Clem here. Can you all hear me okay?
You bet. Good morning, Dennis.
As usual, it's a pleasure to be able to spend a few moments and review the assessment with council. And I hope everybody has received the email with the 9-page document, and I'll be starting on page 2. In the bottom right-hand corner is the slide numbers. And
you bet.
So
Thank you, Dennis.
This is just a quick overview of the assessment class definitions, the sort of a simplified interpretation of the Municipal Government Act, Section 297, and the associated regulation, which is the matters relating to assessment and tax. So to start with, Class 1 is residential. Most people automatically think that's a residence there, and in most cases that's correct. But there can be a vacant parcel that is not used for farming purposes, or there could be an acreage property that maybe they started the garage first and they haven't built the residence yet, that would qualify as residential class of assessment, in addition to the ones identified on the handout there. Class 2 is non-residential, and essentially, as indicated, there has to be a commerce or industry that takes place. It can be gas stations, auto repair shops, or buildings and structures at a high throughput elevator. One thing to note here is not always are these properties permitted for the non-residential assessment that exists on the property. If we see any signs or indication of non-residential activity, i.e. a sign indicating it's some sort of business is happening, we will definitely place non-residential assessment on the portion that is applicable for that. Linear is a subclass of non-residential, and essentially this would exist in many jurisdictions. Some significant linear components in Wheatland County is the... Sorry, is there some background noise all of a sudden? Okay, I'll continue. Is the wells and pipelines. By far, that's our largest component of the non-residential assessment. And, the linear assessment, I should clarify. And it also includes electric power generation, telecom, cable, TV, and telecommunications. And since 2018 assessment, railway has become part of linear assessment. One significant difference between linear assessment and the balance of the non-residential assessment is the assessment valuation that's used for it. Non-residential is at market value, similar to residential. However, linear assessment is assessed at regulated rates. These rates are established by Alberta Municipal Affairs, and the main reason the linear assessment is assessed at regulated rates is it's quite difficult to be able to establish a market value for wells and pipelines and other similar or other components of linear assessment. Class 3, and actually before I go on, is there any questions on Class 1 or 2? Hearing none, I'll continue on to Class 3. This by far is the largest, I guess, physical feature of the county. However, it's one of the smaller assessment components of the county because it's at a regulated valuation. And farmland is, it's your, it's assessed it's land that's used to produce your traditional crops, but it also is land that is used to produce trees, shrubs, bees, fish, or birds, or sod, which is some of not so traditional type farming activities, but they do exist throughout the county. And the regulated rate situation exists for the valuation of farmland, and the provincial base rate is $350 per acre. So that means if land is classified as 100%, it would be assessed at $350 an acre. There's very few parcels that are well, I don't think there's actually any parcels at the 100%, but we have numerous parcels on the west side of the county around the Cheadle area that is some of the better classed farmland, and therefore the highest percentage value would be assigned to that. And then as you progress easterly, the percentage rating assigned to farmland would decrease respectively. Class 4 is machinery and equipment, and this means any materials, devices, fittings, or installations that are used in the processing and manufacturing of a product. Again, this is similar to linear. It's assessed in a regulated rate or on reported cost if it's a really unique type of facility. This gets a preferential assessment treatment whereby there is immediate 25% depreciation applied to the installation when it's new, and a statutory level of 77%, which effectively equates the assessment to be 58% of the actual cost. So some common examples of this would be grain handling equipment at high throughput elevators, at separators or compressors at an oil field situation. Any questions on Okay, we'll move on to slide 3, and these are some key dates for the assessment preparation for land and improvements. So market valuation date is July 1st, the year prior to the tax year. So for instance, the 2019 assessment, which would be used for 2020 tax year, is based on the market value for the class of assessments that use market value standard July 1st valuation. The physical condition date is December 31st, and this comes into play if, let's say, a new house started construction on September 1. It was non-existent at July 1st, but we look at the state of construction. The house was or would have been on December 31st, and actually we look at it probably more like early part of December, and we value it in what we call a progressive or incomplete state, but we backdate the value to July 1st. The same situation exists for non-residential properties. But and as noted, any improvements used in the connection with the manufacturing processing operation are excluded from this valuation, this physical condition date, meaning they would not be accessible if they're not operational by December 31st, or in the case of DIP property, it would be October 31st. So machinery equipment that is not deemed DIP, designated industrial property, must be operational by December 31st. So some examples of that would be like at high throughput elevators, we have some components that are deemed machinery equipment. And whereas designated industrial property means machinery and equipment and linear, the physical condition date is October 31st, must be operational to be accessible for the 2019 assessment year and 2020 tax year. A prime example of that is if a separator package is installed at a well site, the key date now is October 31st for that package to be operational, to be classified as machinery equipment and accessible. So the wells that are drilled after October 31st, both the wells and if there's surface equipment, none of that would come into play for the 2019 assessment. It would come into play for the following year. Any questions on this slide? Okay, moving on to slide 4. This is just to give a little more clarification on linear property versus designated industrial property. And just a reminder for council, I am still a delegated assessor for the provincial assessor to prepare the designated industrial property assessment. Wheatland County entered into a contract commencing in 2018 assessment, and for a 3-year term, and we're still most likely will be granted at least a 1-year extension and possibly a 2-year extension to continue to prepare the designated industrial assessment because the provincial assessor is still trying to get sufficient resources to be able to do the whole provincial assessment for the designated industrial property, which prior to 2018 was the responsibility of the local assessment authority or the appointed assessor for the given jurisdiction. So the main component of this slide I want to draw your attention to is that the designated industrial properties is facilities regulated by AER, which is Alberta Energy Regulator, AUC, which is Alberta Utilities Commission, and NAB, which is the National Energy Board. Now, the AUC regulates telecom type of development, and the NAB regulates electrical type of a development. So those type of facilities, if there's any buildings and structures or machinery equipment at site, would be assessed by the designated or delegated assessor for the given jurisdiction. And then another component of the designated industrial property, or DIP, is the major plants. Wheatland County has 2 major plants, Orica on the west side of the county and Rock Point gas storage on the east side of the county, kind of southeast of Hazard. But other major plants are oil sands facilities and even the sawmills that can exist in northern Alberta. So slide 5 now is the summary of the linear assessment change. And this is only the linear assessment, not the designated industrial property. This by far is the largest component of our assessment, which you'll see further in our slide presentation here. but I wanted to draw your attention to two significant changes that occurred from the 2018 assessment year to the 2019 assessment year. If we look at the PL, which is the pipeline component of the assessment, it's about midway down on the top part of slide 5. You can see that the pipeline assessment in 2018 was $676 million. It reduced to $631 million, which is about a $44 million reduction in assessment, which most of that assessment was a result of policy change. Now, maybe I'll just back up a step here. The change to growth would be any new additions, like any new wells or pipelines added, and change to inflation is assessment year modifier changes. But there is a significant change due to policy, and that stems from the same sort of situation that occurred in 2019 tax year, where there was a tax adjustment given to the coal bed methane or the shallow gas wells, that there was a indication of about a 35% estimation of over valuation of those wells. The province is still trying to actually develop actual updated rates, but they've given an adjustment to the pipeline and wells to accommodate for the estimated overvaluation in both categories, the pipeline and the wells. So as you can see, the WL, which is the wells, the very bottom of that top chart, we had some new wells drilled under the change due to growth, but the change due to policy to $97 million, again, is a significant impact for Wheatland County. The composition of our wells is highly intensified by coal bed or shallow gas wells. Whereas if you look at the bottom of that chart, the pipeline component throughout the whole province has decreased about $525 million due to the policy change, and $1.05 million due to wells. Our total assessment change was 9.78% due to policy, whereas province-wide, the total change due to policy was 2.5. So we experienced significant more impact than probably most jurisdictions because of the composition of our wells being a significant portion of them as shallow gas wells. And then towards the middle of the slide, I've provided a calculation to indicate the impact of the property taxes based on the net change of 152 million lost assessment. That would equate to about 1,316,000 reduction in property taxes from the linear component if the mill rate stayed the same. Any questions on this slide? Okay, is everybody still there?
You betcha. Thank you, Dennis. It's excellent information.
Okay, so now we'll go on to slide 6. So I just wanted to review for council's benefit here is this photo depicts sort of 3 types of assessments that can exist on the property at a well site. If you see the tank towards the right-hand side, that is part of the machinery and equipment component. Kind of back in the background behind the tank would be the 2 pump jacks, which would be sitting on top of a well or close proximity to a well. Those pump jacks are part of the well assessment and part of the linear assessment. And then just in front of the tank, this shiny silver line, that would be a pipeline that's coming either into the site or taking product away from the site. I believe in this case that's probably taking the product away. That would be part of the pipeline assessment. And then to the left of the tank is the building. It's kind of a silver color or whitish color. You can see the window in there. That's part of what we term the building and structure classification of improvement, but it would fall under the definition of non-residential assessment. It's still a DIP classification, but it would be assessed at a sort of a market value valuation. We typically use a depreciated replacement cost approach. So here's sort of a quasi-typical well site in the county that can have 3 types of assessment existing on the location. Okay, on to any questions on that? Okay, on to
I guess,
slide
Dennis.
7.
Sorry, Dennis. Those 2 look like gas tanks. Did you mention them?
Oh, sorry. Yes, those, depending on where they're connected to, if they're providing methanol for the chemical injector that is used inside the separator package, which I would suspect that plastic one that's closer to the building, that would be deemed a machinery and equipment component because it's within. There's a term that's used in the definition of DIP property, and specifically the machinery and equipment. It has to be between the inlet and the outlet valve of the well site. So the other tank, the sort of metal one, the one on the left side, the smaller, probably 500-gallon chemical tank, if it's just connected to a chemical injector that is feeding the well head and not part of the process component, then that would be part of the linear assessment, and it's included in their standardized rates. One significant difference between linear assessment versus machinery equipment or in particular designated industrial or DIP machinery equipment is we take a fairly detailed inventory of all the components that exist on site. So, that probably a 100-barrel or pop tank or on the right side. And if there's, say, 5 of those tanks, we would be assessing all 5 of those because we take a detailed inventory, whereas the linear assessment does more what's called a standardized valuation or rate. And so they have sort of, depending on the formation that the well is in, there's a rate for that well, and it's supposed to sort of take the average value of the components that are associated with that well. Or I shouldn't say average value, but the average cost to set up the well. If there's multiple injection situations, it may not be actually valued site-specific. Well, it will not be valued site-specifically on the linear assessment side of the valuation. However, on the M&E side, each component that exists, if you have a pad site with 2 separator buildings and maybe 4 tanks, those will all be valued separately and added to the current assessment module. There is some discussion about future changes to the valuation of DIP property and to go with a more standardized approach, which would essentially potentially have some impact on reducing assessments because we won't take as detailed inventory of the components that are on site. There would be just more sort of blended valuation that's done for the designated industrial property, but currently that's still in the works of being developed, and I would suspect that the COVID-19 that'll probably be delayed at least another year, if not more.
So in Wheatland County, if we just have a well with no tanks, it could be collecting the same tax as a well with half a dozen tanks on it, if this policy goes through.
Yeah, well, just to be clear, if it's the small chemical tanks, right now there is a slight variation on that well assessment because if there's no separator at the site, there's just a chemical injection. There is a standardized valuation that's included in the well rate. If there's multiple chemical tanks, like those, I'm talking the smaller 500-gallon tanks, there, you know, if you compare two wells, one has only one chemical tank and the other one has 5 chemical tanks, there would be probably very little difference in the assessment of those wells currently. The bigger change that's proposed to come forward is if we look at where the machining equipment components exist. So back to the example where you have a separator package and maybe 3 or 4 tanks. Going forward, and when I say tanks, I mean the larger tanks, like the 100-barrel or larger tanks. Those tanks may not be valued separately, and they may be lumped into a standardization valuation. And that model hasn't been fully, defined yet, what that will mean. But just to give you another analogy of how that would work, if you look at a residential type of a property, the concept would be that we're going to say the province is going to draw the line in the sand somewheres, and they may say, for analogy purpose, if you have a 1,200 square foot house, that's what we're going to assess you at. If your house is above 1,200 square feet, well, you don't get any adjustment to your assessment. If your house is below 1,200 square feet, you still get the same assessment placed. So if you take that analogy on the M&E side of things, you know, they're going to draw the line somewhere in the sand for the equipment. And if you have excess tanks or even a larger size separator than sort of typical, you won't be valued for that in the future. Whereas right now, we pretty much inventory all the tanks and the equipment situated at the site.
Okay, I understand that. If they change that, then we'll get less tax revenue. But it's these large sites are the ones with the tanks. That's where the truck traffic is, and that's what affects our wells, our infrastructure, our roads, is the truck traffic. And if there is no tanks, we don't have trucks running up and down the road. So it's a definite cost to the county extra for tanks. So I just wanted to highlight that. I don't know what the province is going to do, but it does. That's why the roads on the east side of the county are under more stress than the west side, because there's way more tanks on the east side of the county. Thanks. I don't need any comment on that. I'm just venting.
Fair enough. Just to be clear, the larger facilities like the gas plants, I'm not sure if standardization will really kick in there, because those are very unique type facilities. But like you're indicating, the smaller, what's typically referred to as the field installations, there can be quite a variance in the, especially on the oil side, as to the requirement for tanks for storage of oil and or emulsion or liquids that can exist at the well site. So are we okay to move on to slide 7?
Any other questions? You bet. Please proceed.
Okay, so now this one looks a bit daunting with all the information on here. This actually identifies all the assessment codes, the taxable assessment codes that exist for Wheatland County, and the breakdown by each code and the change in assessment. I'm only going to highlight maybe 3 or 4 of these codes just so you get kind of an understanding of where the change in assessment has occurred. So if we look at, for instance, Code 1, which is farmland, the 2018 assessment was 199 million, and the 2019 assessment is pretty much the same. There's very nominal change in the assessment. And then on the right-hand side of this chart, there is the percent composition of the assessment base. So as I indicated during the definition class, farmland, even though it's a large physical component of the county's geographic area, from an assessment standpoint, it's almost the smallest percentage of our assessment base because of the regulated valuation that exists on farmland. And now, if we move to assessment code 8, which is DIP, designated industrial property, machinery, equipment. This is one that I, as a delegate assessor, still am actively involved in preparing the assessment. And you'll notice that the change in that assessment was about $20 million, $20,442,000. Most of that change was due to equipment being disconnected at the well sites because of the uneconomical situation to produce some of the wells, and therefore they've disconnected any equipment that is not deemed, productive to keep in place. Because as soon as the equipment is disconnected, the assessment goes to 0 on the M&E component. If there's a building housing the equipment, that would be identified in assessment code 106, which is the DIP non-res, and the building doesn't get any adjustment unless they physically remove the building that, say, houses the machine equipment off-site. So there were some of those situations that occurred, and therefore when you look at code 106, it went down by about 1.8 million, whereas one of the bigger significant changes on the machine equipment side was the 20 million decrease because of equipment either disconnected or removed. The other component that or assessment code I wanted to identify, draw your attention to, is code 103, which is residential land and improvements. As you can see, that assessment increased by 27 million. Part of that was due to market change, but very little component of that. Majority of that was the increase in the new construction of residences that occurred throughout hamlets or in the rural areas. If you look at line 103 again, and under the 2018 assessment, there's a record count. You can see there's 3,036 records. And then if you look under the 2019 assessment, there's 3,064 records. Now, that doesn't mean that there's 30-some difference in house counts, because in some cases there could be 2 or 3 houses on a given property. This is where the assessment code 103 exists. So there's essentially 30 or just shy of 30 increase in the count of assessment codes 103. The next component that I wanted to draw your attention to is the code 105, non-residential land and improvements. Now this is the assessment classification for the essentially the non-DIP non-residential. So it would be your your gas stations, your grain elevators, your RV storage facilities, those kind of things. As you can see, part of the increase, this saw a bit of an increase, 6.7 million. There was a little bit of new components identified or included in that. the RV storage, or to the just east of Strathmore that had the groundwork just stripped is included in that valuation. There's also the medical marijuana facility on the west side of the county, which in the industrial park, that for the 2018 assessment year was only 25% taxable, and now that's gone to 100% taxable due to a legislation change that the province brought forward for the 2019 assessment. So part of that increase is included in that $6.7 million overall change. And then any other, those are sort of the two bigger components of non-residential, but there's some other smaller components that have occurred as well. And then all the yellow highlighted assessment codes is the detailed linear. We've kind of already reviewed that a bit. And so really this detail boils down to sort of three main classes of tax rates that we can apply for property tax purpose. So if you look towards the bottom right-hand portion of the chart there, farmland has had very minimal change. Residential has seen an increase of about 26 million. Most of that is in new assessment, new construction, but there was a little bit of market change on the west side of the county. And when I say maybe 1 or 2% sort of impact to, because keep in mind, we're reflecting the change in market value from July 1st, 2018 to July 1st, 2019. And then the last component is the non-residential. And this is the one, because even though linear is a subclass of non-residential, from a property tax standpoint, it gets charged the same taxation rate as the like I say, a basic gas station. So if the assessment decreases in that component, and you want to try to generate more revenue, it'll be spread over all non-res category. So we're in probably one of the largest net decrease in assessment since I've been with the county, seeing a $142 million overall net change in the assessment, and the bulk of that is in the linear side of assessment. If you see towards the left-hand side of that chart, the linear itself was 1.3 million of the, or roughly 10% of the overall 3.39% reduction. So it's the significant portion of the change. Any questions on this information?
Dennis, where is Rocky Mountain GPL? If they run this year, they're not in this taxation, are they?
A very small portion of their assessment is in Code 106, the DIP non-residential. They were not operational by October 31st of 2019, but they did have some buildings that are not associated with the actual production facility, if you will. And so there's some temporary office trailers, construction trailers. So those are accessible, and they're included in the valuation for 106. Assuming, or indication when I met with them, is that they were hoping to be operational sometime in spring. I'm not sure if they'll still meet that time frame, but if they do become operational, then by October 31st of this year, then they'll be included in the 2020 assessment for the 2021 tax year.
Okay, thank you.
The only commentary I would add to this is we're probably going to see further reduction in the linear assessment and potentially the dip assessment. There's, the companies are probably will have they're constantly reviewing their wells and their equipment to determine if it's feasible to keep them operational, and then the significant impact that occurred in the linear side of things is that 35% reduction to the valuation for the shallow gas and for the pipelines. And if and when they actually update those rates, that could be possibly even more reduction once they do the finalized rate adjustment for that. So the 2020 assessment, even though the coal bed that Rocky Mountain gas could come on stream, I don't think it would offset. Well, it may have some cushion in the impact for the dip assessment, but I don't think that it's going to have I don't know that it's going to have a huge impact on the taxable assessment. So on to page 8, the 5-year comparison of assessment class. The main thing I wanted to draw your attention to is the top gray shaded ones is the linear assessment, and as you can see, it keeps shrinking in the percentage of our assessment pie. From 38% in 2015 assessment down to 32% of the assessment composition. The only other components that changed significantly during that same time frame is the residential assessment. It was at 24%, 24.8, and it went to 29. So as changes in policy and valuations for linear and for dip property occur, I would think that assessment for residential and for non-residential mostly residential will keep increasing as a percentage of the assessment base for Wheatland County and for other jurisdictions. And so that's the main components I wanted to draw your attention to on this slide. So any other questions, or else I'll be done my presentation.
Dennis, I want to thank you. That was a really informative presentation, and Council appreciates it. Thank you.
Likewise, and take care, Council.
Thank you. A motion to accept as information.
So move.
Councillor Kester has moved. Any further discussion or any last questions? Is any councillor opposed? Motion is carried. We'll move to page 80 for the Community and Development Services report.
Hi, Council. So on page 80 is the Community and Development Services report for February and March of 2020. Just very quickly, obviously with the transition to remote work, each of the divisions in the department are continuing on with the major projects. For example, in community services, we are continuing on with gathering data for our Master Parks plan through engagement processes. Our municipal development plan review is still underway, and including in that as well, our economic development division is undertaking many different initiatives that we will continue with during this unprecedented time. And on that note, we are sending out quite a few briefings to council on some of these initiatives, soliciting your feedback. So I've sent one out to council with regards to the MDP, so stay tuned for those. Just to make note, the Economic Development Division, we are undertaking initiatives with our business community, conference calls in order to ensure that everyone's on the same page with best practices, how businesses are adapting during this time, et cetera. So we're working with our partners, including the town of Strathmore, on that. Our CPOs, it's essentially they are coming into the office as a critical and essential service and continuing the monitoring of the community. And a few new kind of legislative practices are being downloaded to our CPOs. So we're implementing those measures as well as we proceed. And that's it for my presentation.
Thank you. Any questions? A motion to accept the report as information.
I'll move. Tom?
Thank you, Councillor Reichert. Any further discussion? Is any councillor opposed? Motion is carried. We'll move to page 87 of the council package. Appointment of Assessment Review Board Clerk.
Recently, in the first quarter of 2020, our safety codes technician undertook the training and exam certification for the qualification under the MGB for the Assessment Review Board Clerk, and this is just a motion to approve that she will take the position effective April 7th, 2020.
So moved, Ben Armstrong.
Councillor Armstrong has moved to appoint Cindy Ramsey as Assessment Review Board Clerk effective April 7th, 2020. Any discussion? Is any councillor opposed? Motion is carried. We'll move to page 90, Carsland Fire Hall update.
Yes, Council. So this report just outlines how we will proceed at Council's discretion with regards to the Carsland Fire Hall build out. And that's the presentation.
Are there any questions regarding the report?
Just for clarification to council, we're still also reviewing our capital budget, so we're going to bring back a finalized package to council, which may include deferring the project itself, pending on potential additional funding from either federal or provincial levels. Thank you.
Brian, I also have a question that was brought forward once I talked to Ryan Houseworth. There was a donation part of that the county is holding. I think it's about $300,000.
Yes, that's correct. We're just kind of busy in the finance department right now, just with the financial statements of the budget and the MFIR. We're going to get back to Ryan as soon as possible, just on that question. So.
Oh, okay, thank you.
A motion to accept the report as information.
Also move.
Any discussion? Is any councillor opposed? Motion is carried. We'll move to 4.41 on page 93, Transportation and Agriculture Report.
Yes, good morning, Council. So on page 93, you'll see the Transportation and Ag Report for activities in March. Just some items to highlight. So the crews have been shut down like the rest of the admin building for the last 2 weeks here. So we started ramping them back in on April 1st, and as of yesterday, the full reduced crews are back to operations. So that includes the graders, the oiling crews, the gravel crew in a limited capacity, that sort of thing. So just kind of a note for council that some of these services, we do see some areas that need a little more attention now because of the last 2 weeks. So it will take a little while to get ramped back up, and some of the recovery will take longer than normal on this sort of thing. So just an item for council to be aware of. And with the reduced crews, just to note that we are focusing more on maintenance of our infrastructure this year rather than the construction, the new builds, that sort of thing. So that's where we're focusing the majority of our attention to, and just be cognizant of that some of our service levels will have to reduce because of that. Speaking on the ag side, we did reintroduce strychnine sales early last week. Just as the warmer weather came, we had quite a bit of interest, so we introduced that program. So we are open Tuesdays and Thursdays from 8 till noon for farmers to come in and purchase that. At the same time, we received notice that the factory that produces strychnine has shut down in India, I believe. So we are limiting sales to 2 cases per farmer, per resident. And we're going to let everyone have the opportunity to purchase it over the next few weeks here. And then once everyone's had the opportunity, we may open it up to selling more to the individual farmers. But as of right now, we've gone through, I'd say probably half of our inventory right now, and we're not sure of when we'll receive any more. So we are still limiting release of that product right now. And just one other note, the Risk Association for Councillor Bigger there, we did receive the report back from our engineering consultant on the safety and safety review of the crossing just south of Carsland to remove the whistles from the trains that travel through there. So we've received that information. We forwarded it on to CP now, and hopefully we have something back in the next few weeks on their interpretation of that.
Thank you.
And that's my report. I'll be able to answer any questions if you have any.
Any questions regarding the Transportation and Agriculture report? A motion to accept as information.
Also move.
Councillor Bigger has moved. Any discussion? Is any councillor opposed? Motion is carried. We'll move to cost sharing agreement for Highway 901 and 817 intersection on page 97 of the council package.
Sure, thank you, Madam Chair. So this RFP is just referring to the previous discussion we've had about cost sharing with Alberta Transportation on intersection lighting at Highway 901 and 817. Since the last meeting where I was given direction to contact them, we have formed a memorandum of agreement together. They proposed it. It's basically looking at the 50-50 cost split with an approximate cost of installation of around 40 to 60,000. So I'm saying at a high level here of 60,000, we'd be responsible for 30,000 of that. So this RFP is just for council's direction to actually enter into that agreement.
Council's wishes.
I'll move that we go ahead with recommendation to enter into a memorandum of agreement with the Alberta Transportation with cost sharing of lighting of the intersection of 901 and 817.
Council discussion. Is any councillor opposed? Motion is carried. We'll move to correspondence on page 121 of the council package. There's a letter from STARS, and additionally there's a letter from the CAO of the Village of Standard requesting consideration for dust abatement. I'm not sure if administration can speak to this. I believe historically, were we providing dust abatement on those roads?
Through the chair, I'm not aware of if it's been typically installed adjacent to the villages. We typically install dust abatement adjacent to our hamlets, but I'm not aware currently if we do in the past to villages or other municipalities.
Through the chair, if we get requests like this from other municipalities, why wouldn't we treat it the same as one of our ratepayers? If they pay for the, we can, because we don't want them on our roads with their equipment, but if we give them CRIS funding, if they want to use that for dust control, that's fine. We'll do any gravel work and grader work that's required, but they pay for the material. Like, we'll supply the grader, but I think they should have to pay for the gravel and the oil.
So just through the chair, some details on costing. We typically only install a minimum of 400 feet of calcium. We approximate the total cost recovery of that be around $1,400 per 400 feet. And about 700 of that is the product, 700 is labor and gravel.
Yeah, and I don't have a problem supplying the equipment because we work them roads anyways, but any extra gravel or whatever length they want, the municipality, whether it says our standard or Rocky Ford, they should be paying for that cost.
You want to make a motion to that effect?
Yeah, sure. I can. That we'd supply supply the equipment and the man and the labor to install, but the municipality requesting the oil abatement pays for the gravel and the calcium or oil, whichever.
Discussion.
Scott here. I'll support what Ben's put forward.
Tom here, I'll support it also.
Ben, would that include the other villages in the county? I know in Strathmore we put some dust abatement down inside for the Agricultural Society. I don't know if we're still doing that or if that was a one-time thing.
Yeah, like when we have a ratepayer that asks for dust control on a secondary highway, we charge them for the gravel and for the product. So the same, we just treat them the same. We charge them for the product and the gravel. We supply the labor and the machinery. That's all. And for any of the municipalities.
I think there could be potentially, I might look at something like the Strathmore District Agricultural Society separately, just because that is more of an event type focus thing where our ratepayers may potentially benefit. But I think this might be a good model just for like municipal interfaces
No, this is for municipalities requesting it on our on our roads, not the groups, the nonprofit groups in the areas. This has nothing to do with them. Those are handled on a one-off requests.
Yeah, that would be my preference as well. Council discussion. Is any councillor opposed? Motion is carried. A motion to accept the correspondence as information.
Also move, Tom.
Any further discussion? Is any councillor opposed? Motion is carried. Our next agenda items are in a closed session. Prior to us moving into closed session, can each councillor please affirm that they are in a private setting where they will be the only person able to access confidential information in order to uphold our council code of conduct? We'll just do...
I affirm.
It will do roll call. Councillor Wilson?
Yes.
Was that Councillor Kester? Did I already hear you? Sorry.
Yes, you did.
Thank you. Councillor Bigger?
Yes.
Councillor Eichert?
Yes.
Deputy Reeve Clausen?
Yes.
Councillor Armstrong?
Yes, I'm in a secure area.
And I affirm as well. With that, I'll move us into closed session. Is any councillor opposed? Motion is carried. I'm assuming we'll do the same thing. CAO Henderson, call into a separate line for the closed session call?
Yes, I'll provide a number and PIN number in a minute.
Excellent, thank you. Let's maybe take a 10-minute break and reconvene at about 5 minutes after 12 for our closed session. Okay. Thank you.